Every night, without fail, your brain does something objectively bizarre. It disconnects from most sensory input, paralyzes your major muscle groups, and begins generating vivid, often nonsensical simulations that feel completely real while they're happening. You call this dreaming. And for most of human history, nobody had any real idea why it happened. Here's the strange part. Dreaming isn't a glitch. It isn't wasted mental static left over from a busy day. It shows up in remarkably consistent form across virtually every human culture that has ever been studied. And increasingly, evidence suggests it shows up across much of the animal kingdom too. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If dreaming were just noise, why would evolution have kept it around for hundreds of thousands of years at significant biological cost instead of quietly deleting it? To understand why dreaming might have mattered for survival, you first need to understand what happens in the brain during REM sleep, the stage where most vivid dreaming occurs. During REM, the brain is almost as electrically active as it is while you're awake. Areas responsible for emotion, memory, and visual processing light up intensely. Meanwhile, the brainstem sends out a chemical signal that essentially shuts down voluntary muscle movement, a state called REM atonia. Your brain is running a full simulation while your body is locked in place, so you can't act it out. That's an enormous amount of energy and coordination for something with no function. Evolution is not typically in the business of preserving expensive behaviors that do nothing. So researchers have spent decades trying to figure out what dreaming was actually doing for our ancestors. One of the leading theories is called the threat simulation theory, developed by Finnish researcher Antti Revonsuo. The idea is straightforward and a little unsettling. Dreams, especially the kind involving being chased, attacked, or threatened, may have functioned as a kind of ancient survival training ground, a low-stakes environment where the brain could rehearse dangerous scenarios without the danger. Think about what life looked like for early humans. Predators, rival groups, environmental hazards, falls, poisonous plants. Death was a constant, immediate possibility, and a single fatal mistake could end your genetic line permanently. In that world, practicing threat responses, even fictional ones, generated inside your own skull while you slept, could have offered a real evolutionary edge. An individual who dreamed of being stalked by a predator and, in the dream, fled or fought back, was in some sense rehearsing the neural pathways for that exact response. When the real threat eventually showed up, that pathway wasn't being activated for the first time. Supporting evidence for this comes from an unexpected place: what people and children actually dream about. Studies on dream content consistently show that negative emotions and threatening scenarios dominate. Being chased, falling, confrontation, danger. This isn't what you'd expect if dreams were simply random replays of the day's mundane events. Instead, dream content skews dramatically toward exactly the kinds of high-stakes situations that would have mattered most for survival in an ancestral environment. Children's dreams, in particular, show an even higher proportion of threat content, particularly around ages when real-world vulnerability to predators and environmental danger would have been highest in ancestral populations. But threat rehearsal is only one piece of the puzzle. Because dreaming doesn't just simulate danger, it also appears to play a critical role in memory processing. And this is where a second major theory comes in. During sleep, particularly REM sleep, the brain doesn't just store memories, it actively reorganizes them. Neuroscientists have found that the hippocampus, the brain's memory hub, replays patterns of activity from the day during sleep, essentially rehearsing and consolidating what was learned. This process helps stabilize new memories, strengthen useful skills, and in some cases, extract the general pattern or lesson from a specific experience while discarding irrelevant detail. For early humans, this would have been enormously valuable. Imagine learning through a near-miss encounter that a particular rustling sound in tall grass preceded a predator attack. The specific memory, exactly where you were standing, what time of day it was, matters less than the general pattern. Rustling grass equals danger. Sleep, and dreaming specifically, may have helped the ancestral brain extract that generalized survival lesson from a single frightening event and file it away as usable knowledge for the future. There's also a third function that researchers increasingly take seriously: emotional regulation. Dreaming, particularly REM sleep, appears to help process emotionally intense experiences in a way that reduces their raw emotional charge over time. Some sleep researchers describe this as a kind of overnight therapy. The brain replays an emotionally difficult experience, but without the surge of stress chemistry that accompanied the original event, essentially letting you process the memory while turned down the intensity dial. For a species living in near-constant, low-level danger, this would have been critical. Encountering a predator, losing a group member, being injured. All of these were the kinds of high-stress events that, left unprocessed, could impair judgment and decision-making going forward. An individual who could emotionally metabolize trauma more efficiently through dreaming may have been better equipped to respond clearly and rationally the next time danger appeared, rather than being paralyzed or overwhelmed by unresolved fear. Put these three functions together: threat rehearsal, memory consolidation, emotional regulation, and dreaming stops looking like a strange, purposeless side effect of sleep. It starts looking like a nightly maintenance system, one that trained the brain for danger, filed away useful survival patterns, and processed the emotional weight of a genuinely dangerous existence, all while the body lay still and vulnerable in the dark. That vulnerability matters too. Sleep itself is a bizarre evolutionary trade-off. An animal that spends roughly a third of its life unconscious and immobile is, in a very literal sense, gambling with its own survival every single night. For sleep to have persisted despite that risk, whatever it was accomplishing had to be worth the exposure. Dreaming may be part of that answer. Not just passive unconsciousness, but active, ongoing cognitive labor happening specifically during the most vulnerable hours of the day. Of course, modern human dreams don't look quite like ancestral survival simulations most nights. You're far more likely to dream about a forgotten work deadline than a saber-toothed cat. But the underlying machinery appears to be the same ancient system, still running, still processing threats, still consolidating memory, just repurposed for an environment that looks nothing like the one it evolved in. Which means, every time you wake up from a strange, vivid, or unsettling dream, you're not just clearing out mental clutter. You may be watching a survival system built hundreds of thousands of years ago, quietly doing the exact job it was designed to do, on a threat that no longer exists.